its 7 Sports special football feature. That was the season that was. The moments of glory and those of defeat. A close-up look at the memorable highlights from season 83. At 9:30, we bring you more great action with a replay of the 1983 VFL Grand Final. And throughout the night tonight, you'll join the winners and the losers live for their celebrations and commiserations. One day in September, exclusively yours tonight through 7 Sport. Proud to be a part of One Day in September.
General Motors Holden, National Panasonic, Rank Arena and Carlton and United Breweries are pleased to present the VFL 1983 Grand Final. Today's telecast is part of the Holden VFL 1983 Premiership season.
Seven Sport welcomes viewers from around Australia and through RTV2 Hong Kong, Channel 4 England, TV2 New Zealand, and ESPN America. The home and away games are now but a memory. The field has been narrowed down to 2. Hawthorn versus Essendon for the 1983 VFL Grand Final.
A very good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the MCG, the scene of the 1983 Grand Final. The VFL Grand Final to be played this year between Hawthorn and the side that has made it from the elimination final. They've become the glamour side, the tough side, Essendon, led by coach Kevin Sheedy. The big news that we noticed in the reserves lineup, the big question was who was going to take their place in the final 20 for the Essendon side. Well, there's still some mystery surrounding the Essendon lineup. Ron Andrews and Frank Donnell both took their places in the Army Reserve Cup side, so it means that young Ezard, Copping and Clayton have made it into the 21. But there are several questions over fitness of a number of players. Billy Duckworth had a question mark over him. Paul Vanderhaar also had a question mark over him, and there are a couple of other players as well. But we'll know more about that in just a moment. The atmosphere here at the MCG around me, in excess of 110,000 people, and it really is a magical feeling. That one day in September, and to get the official proceedings underway, now let us meet the General Manager of HSV 7 in Melbourne, Mr. Ron Casey.
Your Excellencies, Prime Minister, Mr. Premier, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Victorian Football League, welcome to the 1983 Grand Final, Hawthorn versus Essendon. We also welcome sportsmen around Australia and through the technology of OTC via Intelsat to ESPN in the United States. We welcome the estimated 25 million people who are with us today in the United States, Great Britain, Canada, Hong Kong, New Zealand, Italy, Saudi Arabia, Ireland and Mexico. Melbourne is proud to host this great Australian event, and we welcome as the official sponsors General Motors Holden. Now, while the umpires are getting ready and the teams are warming up in the dressing rooms, it's my pleasure to introduce the magnificent sound and sight of the combined service bands of Victoria.
Mr. Ron Casey making the official introduction to some of the guests here and explaining that our coverage, of course, is a worldwide coverage here this afternoon. Wherever you may be, we hope you can sit back, relax if you can. I know it'll be very hard if you're a Hawthorn or an Essendon supporter, but enjoy what should be a classic Grand Final. Both sides have done remarkably well to make it to the finals, but as we know, there are still question marks over both sides as to the makeup of the final 20 that are going to run out onto the ground. The 3 gentlemen that may be able to help us a little more, and the 3 gentlemen that are going to take you throughout the afternoon are set up in our commentary position now as I say good afternoon to Peter Landy, Bob Skilton and Lou Richards.
Thank you, Sandy, and a very good afternoon, everyone. And you've probably gathered by that little flutter of the breeze that's coming from the south this afternoon. But mercifully, Lou and Bob, the sunshine has cleared in pretty well ideal conditions for a grand final.
Well, Peter and Bob, it's perfect conditions. And if you can't get the feeling or can't feel what's going on here today, you shouldn't be living in Melbourne or Victoria, because this is probably the most exciting grand final that we've attended to, and two of the toughest sides performing, and we're in for a hell of a game today.
People at home are probably saying to themselves, what effect will the wind have? Because there's no doubt there's quite a wind, and that's the one great thing about the MCG. There isn't any worries. You can score at both ends of the ground, and at the present moment we're watching what I would say is a very, very conscious Hawthorn side, and there's Ken Judge. So Judge is one of the five players.
Well, then again, you don't know, Bob, because sometimes these coaches dress the interchange players up when there's five named, and it could be just a blind on the part of the coach.
Would you do that to a player at a grand final?
Well, I don't think you would, but they'll do anything to win a flag, won't they?
Bob, we were talking at lunch about motivating players. You surely wouldn't need to motivate any player for a grand final.
I couldn't believe that anyone would need any motivational film or anything else. Just the mere fact that it's a grand final. Now, personally, I've never played in one, but I know the feeling of a semi-final, and that was just enough to realise that from the point of view of a grand final, what more would you need?
All right, well, Essendon and Hawthorn, both worthy grand finalists, as Terry Danaher mentioned yesterday in his interview with us. Let's check on the respective lineups of the two teams now.
The tough, mobile Hawthorn defence revolves around the greatly improved Gary Ayres in the back pocket, David O'Halloran and utility John Kennedy. Across the half-back line, they will get support from the consistent Rodney Eade, Chris Mew, who's been one of the best centre-half-backs in the game in 1983, and Russell Green. Wingman Robert Di Domenico has mixed feelings about his clash with Essendon earlier in the year, but he will be alongside prolific kick winner Terry Wallace and Peter Swan. One of the game's greats, Peter Knights, has been named on the forward flank for his 250th game, alongside 17-game veteran Dermot Brereton and possibly Australia's outstanding flanker Gary Buckenara. Last year's Recruit of the Year, Richard Loveridge, is in the pocket alongside Australia's top footballer for many years, Lee Matthews. As a rover and forward, Lethal Lee has kicked 771 goals. In the other pocket is Michael McCarthy. Ruckman Ian Payton will be assisted by ruck rover Michael Tuck, with Colin Robertson roving. It will be Tuck's 18th finals match and 254th game for the club. The interchange bench boasts 5 fine players. Beanpole ruckman Michael Byrne is back after injury. West Australian Ken Judge, a first-year player, will also be considered. A sentimental favourite for a berth will be Kelvin Moore, who over nearly 300 games has been one of the game's great full-backs. David Polkinghorne has already played in 2 premiership teams, while young Russell Shields will also come under consideration. West Australian Bill Duckworth, South Australian Paul Weston and Victorian Shane Hurd comprise the Essendon full-back line to cover the likes of Loveridge, Lethal, Lee Matthews and McCarthy. Tough halfback Stephen Carey is alongside one of last week's best players, Kevin Walsh, and the vastly improved Peter Bradbury, who's earned a reputation as a fine tagger. Former Richmond captain and grand final specialist Brian Wood is back after a hamstring injury on one wing, with Mervyn Neagle breathing easily after being let off by the VFL Tribunal in the centre. Gary Folds is on the other wing. Glenn Hawker was best of field last week, and he's been named on a forward flank alongside Roger Merritt, who's been a focal point for the Bombers in all 3 finals. Former Magpie dynamo Rene Kink is on the other flank. Essendon always looks to the aerial brilliance of Paul van der Haar to lift the side, and in flight, he's one of the best marks in the game. Skipper Terry Danaher has battled to overcome a virus, and like van der Haar, will be under intense pressure. Darren Williams has roved in only 10 games, and he'll be in the other pocket. Essendon's ruck division is first-rate, with Simon Madden, fast, tall and a superb mark, backed up by the charismatic youngster Tim Watson and a top rover in Tony Bahagia. Likewise, Essendon have named 5 interchange players. Alan Ezard, who's impressed in his 7 games, Stephen Copping, who starred last week in the Army Reserve Cup match, Cameron Clayton, an interchange last week, rugged Ronnie Andrews back after suspension, and Frank Donnell, a fine finisher.